The prospect of Taiwan declaring independence is a geopolitical tinderbox with potential to ignite a cascade of global consequences. Drawing uncomfortable parallels to historical flashpoints like the Cuban Missile Crisis, such a move could trigger military aggression from China, endanger regional stability in East Asia, and rattle the foundations of international organizations like the United Nations. Beyond the military realm, the economic repercussions could echo the 1973 oil crisis, disrupting global trade and technology sectors. As we delve into these intricate scenarios, we start with the immediate and unsettling question: what would a Chinese military response look like? If Taiwan were to declare independence, the geopolitical tension with China could escalate into unprecedented aggression, with a palpable risk of military conflict that could engulf not only the Taiwan Strait, but potentially draw in global superpower.
在这里，我要重申，台湾绝不会接受一国两制，绝大多数台湾民意也坚决反对一国两制。
The simmering tension is already observable on the front lines, such as the island of Kinmen, which carries the scars of historical conflict with China.
台湾自古以来就是中国领土不可分割的一部分。任何人、任何势力都不要低估中国人民捍卫国家主权和领土完。
Recent Chinese claims of sovereign rights over the Taiwan Strait have already obliterated its neutral international status, and a declaration of independence would likely be the tipping point for a full-scale military response.
The department sees no reason why tensions over Taiwan need to lead to anything like confrontation.
In a show of increasing American support, high-profile visits like that of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have been met with aggressive Chinese military exercises.
I don't think China wants to take over an island that's a heap of smoking rubble. I think if we do this right, Xi Jinping can be deterred, and he must know that if he makes a play for Taiwan and fails, that is regime threatening for him.
Including missile tests and air incursions, aimed at wearing down Taiwan's military and morale. In this highly charged atmosphere, even a minor miscalculation could trigger an unintentional escalation.
The real defense has to be the bravery of the Taiwanese people, the willingness to protect your nation. Yeah.
Taiwanese authorities are thus caught in an intricate balancing act, wanting to deter Chinese advances while not alarming their populace or inciting further aggression. U.S. officials, meanwhile, worry that Taiwan's traditional military strategies are not sufficiently agile to fend off a well-prepared Chinese offensive, and they also fear that China is gradually gaining the upper hand, developing capabilities that could make American intervention ineffective.
和平统一，创造广阔空间，但绝不为各种形式的台独分裂活动留下。
In such a scenario, the balance of power in the Pacific would shift dramatically, weakening U.S. influence and potentially transforming Taiwan from a democratic stronghold to a cautionary tale of unyielding geopolitical might. Historically, the very core of Beijing's stance towards Taiwan revolves around the One China policy, and any departure from the status quo would likely be viewed as a direct threat to China's territorial sovereignty and integrity.
Their biggest military strength is size. Size of their missile force, size of their amphibious force, size of their air force, their navy, their cyber.
Given past warnings and military postures, such a declaration would likely elicit a forceful, possibly military response, leading to a significant geopolitical crisis.
There's no reason for tensions across the Taiwan Strait to devolve into any kind of conflict. Nothing's changed about our One China policy.
The U.S., having maintained a policy of strategic ambiguity with regards to Taiwan, could find itself in a precarious situation, especially in light of incidents like General Mark Milley's communications with his Chinese counterpart in 2020. Any miscalculation or aggressive posturing could then entangle multiple global superpowers in the conflict, further complicating an already volatile situation.
Our goal is that hypothetical never comes to fruition. And what we know through history, the best way to do that is supply the weapons to allow people to deter.
Moreover, China's desire to reclaim Taiwan is not merely symbolic.
We insist on striving for the prospect of peaceful reunification, but we will never promise to give up.
Taiwan's strategic location and economic significance, especially in microchip manufacturing, make it a prized asset. In the shadow of China's assertive moves in the South China Sea and its observed responses to events like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Beijing's reactions can be inferred to be calculated and aggressive. China's efforts to dominate the Indo-Pacific region, especially through maritime strategies and the establishment of area denial zones, indicate that any move by Taiwan towards independence would be countered with vast military and strategic might. In such a high-stakes environment, even minor provocations could ignite a full-blown crisis, forcing global superpowers to reconsider their positions and strategies in the Indo-Pacific region. If Taiwan declares independence, triggering unprecedented aggression from China, the ripple effects would likely reverberate throughout the region, compromising the security balance in East Asia. Japan, which has a self-defense force of approximately 247,000 active-duty military personnel and a strategic alliance with the United States. Japan might find itself drawn into the conflict either directly or indirectly. Article 5 of the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty states that an armed attack against either country would act as a catalyst for mutual defense, and any military clash near Taiwan could imperil Japan's Senkaku Islands.
This is a stern warning to the provocative activities of Taiwan independent secessionist forces and collusion with the external forces, and a necessary move to safeguard national sovereignty,
which China also claims as the Diaoyu Islands. South Korea, with its own geopolitical complexities including North Korea and an alliance with the US, could also be ensnared in the conflict. South Korea's military, one of the largest in the world with over 600,000 active-duty personnel, could be torn between its US alliance obligations and its significant economic ties with China, which is its largest trading partner as of 2022. Moreover, such a scenario would have dire consequences for regional stability, putting at risk major global shipping routes like the Strait of Malacca, through which about 40% of the world's trade passes. Countries with claims in the South China Sea, including Vietnam and the Philippines, might also find their territorial disputes with China further complicated as Beijing's military assertiveness grows. Furthermore, smaller nations that are part of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, which had a combined GDP of around $3.11 trillion in 2019, could face economic repercussions and increased Chinese influence, destabilizing the region both economically and politically. In this tense landscape, regional security forums like the ASEAN Regional Forum, ARF, and the East Asia Summit could be put to the test as countries struggle to maintain a semblance of balance and peace. The ripple effect will continue, and countries around the globe might find themselves in a complex quandary that could lead to a significant realignment of alliances and partnerships. The European Union, for example, which had a trading volume with China exceeding €649.5 billion in 2020, making China its largest trading partner, would be caught in a difficult position. On one hand, EU member states have a long-standing transatlantic alliance with the US framed through NATO, which has a combined military budget of over $1 trillion as of 2021. On the other hand, the economic stakes with China are incredibly high. This could strain relations and force hard choices, compromising collective policies like the European Union's 2019 Strategic Outlook paper, which referred to China as a systemic rival. Likewise, countries in the Indo-Pacific region that have significant economic relations with both the US and China would face particularly acute dilemmas. Australia, for instance, had a two-way trade value of 252 billion Australian dollars with China in the 2020 to 2021 fiscal year, but also has a robust military alliance with the US through the ANZUS Treaty. Similarly, India, which had a trade volume of $87 billion with the United States and $77.7 billion with China in the 2019 to 2020 fiscal year, would also be at a crossroads. These countries might have to recalibrate their alliances, choosing between economic benefits and security commitments, thereby creating an unpredictable and possibly unstable new global geopolitical landscape. Should Taiwan declare independence, thereby triggering an aggressive military response from China, the ripple effects on global institutions could be considerable, most notably affecting the United Nations. Currently, the United Nations recognizes the People's Republic of China as the legitimate government of China and does not recognize Taiwan, in line with the One China policy. As of 2020, China contributes about 12% of the UN regular budget and roughly 15% of the UN peacekeeping budget, making it the second largest contributor to the UN after the United States. The aggressive stance taken by China in the hypothetical situation of Taiwanese independence could polarize member states, compelling them to take sides on whether to continue recognizing Beijing's One China policy or to question it in light of aggressive actions. This division within the United Nations could extend to other international bodies in which China plays a significant role, such as the World Health Organization, WHO, or the World Trade Organization, WTO. A geopolitical event of this magnitude could paralyze decision-making processes and cast doubt on the effectiveness of these organizations. This could remind us about the déjà vu images of the aftermaths of World War I situation, where countries started to oppose the international order by defying the principles of the League of Nations, and the world plunged into another great war, the World War II. Countries opposing China's aggressive measures might push for sanctions or diplomatic isolations via these platforms, leading to counter-moves by countries aligned with China. A sharp division among the 193 UN member states over Taiwan's independence and China's hypothetical military aggression could undermine the core tenets of international cooperation and compromise the effectiveness of global institutions. Likewise, in the wake of an aggressive military response from China over Taiwan, the fallout would reverberate through multiple facets of the global economy. To start with the semiconductor industry, Taiwan is home to TSMC, the world's largest contract chipmaker, which is a key supplier to companies like Apple, Qualcomm, and Nvidia. A conflict in Taiwan could effectively freeze production or shipment, causing widespread disruption. To put it in numbers, Taiwan's semiconductor industry generated about $115 billion in revenue in 2020. A halt or even a slowdown in this output would lead to electronics shortages, soaring prices, and a stunted pace of technological innovation worldwide. Beyond technology, the Taiwan Strait is one of the world's busiest waterways. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, over 16 million barrels of crude oil passed through the strait each day in 2018. Any military conflict in the strait would likely disrupt these shipments, causing global oil prices to spike. Countries like Japan and South Korea, which import most of their energy needs, would be especially hard hit, leading to increased costs for heating, electricity, and transportation. This could stoke inflationary pressures at a time when economies are still recovering from the pandemic, leading to a rise in living costs for millions of people. If Taiwan were to declare independence and China responded with unprecedented military aggression, the specter of nuclear warfare could become an alarming concern. China, which possesses a nuclear arsenal estimated to include about 320 warheads as of 2020, has a no first-use policy. However, the severity of a conflict over Taiwan, a territory China has vowed to reclaim, could place tremendous pressure on this policy, although the use of nuclear weapons would be an exceedingly drastic step. In such a scenario, the consequences would be globally catastrophic, with immediate and long-lasting environmental, economic, and human costs. Moreover, the involvement of the U.S., another nuclear-armed state committed to assisting Taiwan, could escalate the conflict into a full-blown nuclear confrontation, drawing in other nations and imperiling global security. The ripple effects of a conflict over Taiwan could also trigger a new global arms race. countries would be motivated to accelerate their military programs and invest in advanced and possibly even unconventional weapon systems. In numbers, global military spending already reached $1.98 trillion in 2020, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. A conflict of this magnitude could cause these figures to surge even higher, hampering arms control initiatives like the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, NPT, and the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT. The rise in militarization would also divert critical resources away from pressing global issues like poverty, healthcare, and climate change, altering priorities for nations around the world and affecting the global balance of power in ways difficult to predict. If Taiwan declares independence and China responds with military aggression, the humanitarian implications would be immense. According to a 2021 estimate by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, China's People's Liberation Army, PLA, has an active duty military force of roughly 2 million, while Taiwan has around 140,000 active duty troops.
Armed forces will uphold our sovereignty and maintain our national security in a composed, rational, and thoughtful manner.
A full-scale conflict could produce casualties in the tens or even hundreds of thousands. Additionally, Taiwan's dense population centers like Taipei, which houses over 2.6 million people, would be vulnerable to aerial bombardment and missile strikes. If we consider historical precedents such as the Yugoslav wars or the Syrian conflict, large numbers of civilians would become refugees almost overnight. The global community would face the pressure of a new refugee crisis comparable to the Syrian crisis, which has displaced more than 6 million people according to UNHCR figures. In the ideological domain, Taiwan stands as a democratic model in East Asia, scoring 93 out of 100 in Freedom House's Freedom in the World 2021 report. A forced unification with authoritarian China, which scores just 9 in the same report, could demoralize democratic movements globally. For example, pro-democracy protests in places like Hong Kong or Belarus could lose momentum or international support, fearing a similar fate. In terms of nationalism, the use of military force in a Taiwan scenario would likely surge nationalist sentiment in China, possibly strengthening President Xi Jinping's position, but also raising the specter of ultranationalism. This could mirror situations like Putin's Russia after the annexation of Crimea, where nationalist pride swelled but also led to more autocratic governance. This heightened nationalism emboldened Russia's courage to invade Ukraine, thus potentially destabilizing the entire region. In conclusion, the prospect of Taiwan declaring independence will have repercussions that would reverberate from the military theater to global economies, alliances, and even the integrity of international institutions. As we've seen, the stakes are extraordinarily high, touching on core interests of major world powers and risking a destabilizing chain reaction that could reshape the global landscape for decades to come. Therefore, the pragmatic way forward necessitates nuanced diplomacy, engagement, and multilateral dialogue. It is imperative for all parties involved to exercise restraint, pursue open communication, and consider the profound global ramifications before taking unilateral actions. Thank you for joining us in exploring this complex issue. Remember to stay informed as the moves on the grand geopolitical chessboard will shape the world in ways we can't yet fully foresee. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for more in-depth analysis of the global events. If you found this video insightful and want to see more, check out some of our previous videos and hit the subscribe button to stay connected.